once you are more than 5 people, they're really, really important. They'll actually save you time so that instead of having 5 different conversations, you're just having one.
You're listening to Thrive by Design, business, marketing, and lifestyle strategies for your jewelry brand to flourish and thrive. Let's get started.
Today's sponsor is ninadesigns.com. Nina Designs is a wonderful wholesale jewelry company that is based out in California. They specialize in charms, pendants, leather, tassels, and so much more. All these great things that you need for your jewelry making and for your jewelry supplies. So pop on over to ninadesigns.com. The cool thing about Nina is that she's really supportive of emerging brands, and so she's always trying to help out. So she's offered a really wonderful deal for our Flourish and Thrive and Thrive by Design community. You can head on over to ninadesigns.com, enter the code THRIVE at checkout when you're placing your wholesale order, and you'll receive $10 off. I just want to mention that she is offering this just for a one-time use for each customer. So head on over to ninadesigns.com, place your amazing order because they are an awesome company to work with. Enter the code THRIVE at checkout and receive $10 off your order. I'm really excited to have my guest, Nina Cooper of Nina Designs, back on the show again today. Nina, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Well, Nina came and spoke at our live event, Flourish and Thrive Live, and I love listening to Nina talk because she is one of the most grounded, down-to-earth jewelry business people that I've ever met, and she has this very sort of calming nature when she talks about business. And we've talked a lot over the past, I feel like it's been the past year, about a lot of different things, including business plans. And I know that there's a lot of controversy out there, like, should I write a long business plan? Do I need a business plan? And all that sort of jazz. So I thought Nina and I could sort of walk you through some of this stuff today. And Nina has a really great take on it. So I'm really excited to talk to you about that today, Nina.
I'm excited to share my enthusiasm for business plans with all the artsy folks out there who might be resisting them.
I love it. Your enthusiasm around it. So, for people who are listening for the first time and don't know who you are, I thought I would go through and just do a little bit of a formal introduction, if that's cool.
Great.
All right. So Nina Cooper is the founder and chief creative officer of Nina Designs. Her company designs jewelry supplies that are manufactured in Asia and sold to over 2,000 professional jewelers around the world. After 30 fabulous years in business, she's eager to share her expertise. Cooper contributes regularly to jewelry-oriented magazines, including Jewelry Artist, Ornament, Beadwork, and Stringing. She's also been published in American Cinematographer and Glamour magazine. Cooper's appeared twice as an expert guest on the PBS show, Beads, Baubles, and Jewels, and is the author of several best-selling webinars on the business of jewelry. So, Nina, thanks so much for being here once again.
It's my pleasure. I'm super excited. I love your community. I had a great time with you guys in New York, and I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation.
I am too. And so, I in your own words, I would really love to hear just a little bit more about your journey and how you got to where you are today. And you can weave in whatever things about business plans you want to talk about as well.
Sure. So I'm sure there are a few of you out there that have been making jewelry since you were kids. I was one of those kids. I sold jewelry at my first trade show when I was 10 years old. Well, craft show, not trade show.
Yeah.
Little elastic beaded necklaces. And I got hooked then both on jewelry, but also the rush of making a sale and knowing that someone was going to wear something beautiful that I had made. And I continued making jewelry and selling it to my friends' parents. And then I carried all my jewelry around in a shoebox all through high school and sold to friends, or I sit down in a cafe and just open it up and, jewelry kind of sells itself. The birds descend. All the women in the cafe would come over and shop with me.
Wait, that's so funny. That's literally the epitome of selling it right off of yourself.
Exactly. I call it the shoebox approach to marketing. So, but it's very effective, right?
Right.
And then I moved on. I had a booth on Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley, which is a very famous street where artists have been selling their stuff since the 60s. And that was a really pivotal time for me because I noticed other artists basically raising their kids in the street, in the smog from the cars. And I realized that as much as I love jewelry, I did not want to raise my kids on the street. I was a student at UC Berkeley, and I decided to major in business so that I could learn how to organize my jewelry business in a way that I could actually make a living. And then I started selling at local boutiques and then at trade shows. And at some point I deconstructed and I moved from finished jewelry backwards. I say I have a postmodern career because I deconstructed from jewelry to jewelry parts. There were clasps and earring findings I wanted to use that I couldn't find anywhere. So I started having them made in Indonesia, where I had also started having a lot of my beaded jewelry made. And it just kind of snowballed from there. I also realized that I much more enjoy working day to day with jewelry designers and with fashion buyers. So jewelry supply was a better fit for my personality.
I like that. I love that evolution. And I love that you are a jewelry designer and now you have a business supplying to other jewelry artists, which is really cool.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference if the person designing your clasp actually understands how a necklace should lay and how a clasp should work.
Absolutely. I mean, that totally, of course, you think about, there's like a whole mechanics behind it. Because I know when I've designed my own findings, it's like there's a lot of figuring out that goes into it. So it's nice that you already have the mechanics worked out, which is really cool. So let's talk about everyone's least favorite subject, planning for their business. So before, I know you have a story about business planning that's going to come out in this interview. I just have a feeling for some reason. But before we sort of dive into sort of your, journey with the business plan, why do you think business planning is important?
So I think it's really important because if you don't know where you want to go, it's really hard to get there. And it's an issue of having agency in your life and in your journey. Do you want to just go where the wind blows you? Mm-hmm. Or do you want to focus on a goal and make your way to it, even if the wind sort of buffets you along the way?
Right. So I'm curious, when did you write your first business plan, or how long did it take you to actually get that up and running? And why did it take you that amount of time?
Okay, so the reason I have a motto that it's never too late to write a business plan. And the reason I have that motto is because I was in business for at least, and I don't mean my little girl craft show business, but business, at least 20 years before I wrote my first business plan.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's really crazy. And I was very sort of virulently opposed to them because I felt that there were so many factors that are out of our control in terms of how much we sell in a given year, that it was kind of ridiculous to try and forecast, and it was just a waste of time. And since I didn't have investors that I was accountable to, I thought it was just a waste of my time, so I wasn't going to bother to do it. But when I first buckled down and did my first business plan, it was kind of a born again moment because I realized that this tool that I had been avoiding for so long was actually extremely liberating. And now I do it every single year without fail.
Yeah, it's also really super helpful. So I want to share my story about business planning because I think that this is related to your procrastination waiting 20 years. When I started my business, I did something sort of similar that you did. I mean, I didn't carry a shoebox, but I was designing jewelry and wearing it, and people would buy it off my neck. So I worked at Nordstrom, and people would just buy my jewelry. So when I decided to go full time and start a business, my dad was like, you need to write a business plan, or else no one's going to take you seriously. So I was like, okay. So I get this business plan software called Business Plan Pro, and wrote a 35-page business plan with all these numbers that I didn't know what they meant. And I was guessing on my target market and everything because I was really new to this process of understanding what business planning is. And the interesting part about writing that business plan was that a lot of the things that we actually teach in Flourish and Thrive Academy, like identifying your target market and understanding what motivates them to buy, understanding what your USP, or as we like to call the DSP, desired sharing proposition, or also known as the unique selling proposition. All those are things that we break down a lot easier here. But I remember I wrote this 30-page business plan. It was so in depth. I remember I showed it to my dad, and like, I feel like someone else, like a family friend who was a finance guy, like, oh, okay, it looks good. And I never, ever looked at it again. In fact, I put it in my filing cabinet and then pulled it out years later. And I started looking at the numbers. I'm like, you had no idea what you were talking about at that time. But this is like the interesting part about business planning, is that you need to have different like metrics and targets in place. And then it also needs to be something that you're going to use, or there's no purpose in actually writing it.
Well, okay, I'll differ a little bit. I think there is some purpose because it leads to a lot of questions.
Okay.
And I think there is some value in just answering those questions for yourself and gaining that kind of clarity. But I definitely would agree that a 35-page plan, especially right out of the gate, is probably a little bit of overkill. I really love Jen Horan's one-page business plan because it basically is just a series of questions that you can answer without a calculator, without looking at, spreadsheets. It's a series of questions about what your business, what you're trying to accomplish with it, and how you want to run it. And without even realizing it, by the time you get to the end of answering all the questions, you pretty much have the skeleton of your business plan already drafted. And really the one, it is a one-page business plan. And I think in one page, you can encapsulate both, what your business is about and where you want it to go for the coming year. There are other tools like the book Traction, which I think is great for a company that's a little bit larger. If you have, 6 to 15 employees working a little bit more in depth with a process like the one in Traction can be very useful for getting everyone on the same page and using the same vocabulary. It makes communication a lot more efficient. And again, I hate meetings, but once you are more than 5 people, they're really, really important. They'll actually save you time so that instead of having 5 different conversations, you're just having one and everybody is getting the same version of it. So again, the type of business plan you use can evolve as your company evolves, but it's so valuable. And I just want to demonstrate this. I just want to ask you a question. I have a feeling I know the answer, but I
want to stop you right there just so that we can mention these resources again. It's Jim Moran's one-page business plan and Gino Wickman's book called Traction.
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
So I wanted to make sure that everyone could hear that. Okay, perfect. Sorry. So what's your question?
My question for you is, are you a list maker?
Yes.
Okay, and do you ever stay up at night with just things going through your head where you're afraid you're going to forget, or you even reach over and write them down or give yourself a voice memo so you can finally go to sleep?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, always. It's like first thing in the morning, in the shower, in yoga, and right before I go to bed. So on my phone, I literally the notes are crazy, things to do today, or here are things that you need to remember for X, Y, and Z or whatever. Always.
Yeah. So I think a lot of us who are running jewelry companies are list makers. And I just want to say, I think it helps if you're having resistance to the idea of a business plan to just think of it as the ultimate list.
Yeah.
And it's a way of organizing your list of what you're trying to do with your company and what you want to accomplish in the coming year. And the reason that I said earlier that business plans are liberating is that in the same way that when you're lying in bed and all this stuff is going through your head and you finally write it down, then you can finally go to sleep. Once you get your list for the year down on paper, it's not running around in your head like, don't forget this, don't forget that. And it liberates you to actually roll up your sleeves and do the work.
And then I feel like what it also allows you to do, when you have this big plan for the year and you have a longer term plan, maybe 3 to 5 years out or something, just with bigger sort of goals that you want to head towards, you can break it down into more manageable chunks, a 90-day.
Exactly.
It's called a lot of different things, but 90-day sprints. Isn't that what Gino calls them, 90-day sprints?
He calls them rocks, and I use
that's right.
90-day rocks.
Yeah, so you have your goals that you're trying to work out, basically by quarter, and it's so much easier to reach those goals if you're focused on the quarter than the entire year, because if you have a revenue target, let's say, for the year, that can become really overwhelming. But if you break it down into quarters and you know what you need to do by quarter, you can focus just on that quarter, achieve your goal, and then move on to the next. So
I would just like to add to that it's been documented that people really overestimate what they can accomplish in 1 year, but they drastically underestimate what they can accomplish in 10 years. And I think it's a really helpful exercise, especially if you have a fear of failure. Go ahead and make a modest goal for your first year, but go through the practice of then saying, okay, if let's say I have 5% growth this year, at the end of the year, what's my sales revenue total going to be? And then if I maintain that rate of growth over 10 years, do the math and say, okay, in year 2, it'll be this much. In year 3, it'll be this much. And you'll be amazed at how much your sales will have grown in that 10th year. I think that's a very empowering exercise.
Ooh, I love that. That's awesome. So I love what you said about that people, I just wrote it down here. People overestimate what they can accomplish in 1 year. I'm sure I'm one of those people. I feel like I always have lofty goals. And they underestimate what they can accomplish in 10 years. That's such a great way to think about it. So dream big for the 10 years and then be a little bit more tight and right in the 1 year.
And then I'd just like to add to that, for me, I think part of the reason I was resistant, even though maybe I wouldn't have been willing to admit it, to doing that first business plan was sort of the fear of failure. If you're a perfectionist and you're always a straight A student, the idea of putting a goal down on paper and then that immediately, as soon as you do that, that opens the door to the possibility of not achieving that goal. And, I've been in business a long time, and I would say that most of the time we don't achieve our annual goal.
Right. Because we have too big of lofty goals or whatever.
Well, but it's okay. I think it's okay to have lofty goals, and it's okay if you don't make them. As long as you sort of break it down and realize why. Like often it is things out of your control, but the reaching towards it is still very useful. And if you're breaking your goals down, we don't just break it down quarterly, but we actually have weekly goals.
Yes.
Even though we might not have made our annual goal, there were definitely weeks where we made our goal, and then that gave us the opportunity to really celebrate those achievements.
Yes. Robin and I like to say, you want to make your goals like exciting and like a stretch, but not too big so that when you complete it, you're not totally defeated. So I like the idea that you're like setting weekly goals. So sometimes it's a number that you can actually potentially achieve, and you often do. And then sometimes you don't, and that's okay. But at least it's like you're feeling like this sense of success and celebration because you're able to achieve some of those things.
Right. And even if it adds up to not making the annual goal, we still have those small celebrations along the way. If you make the goals too safe, then it's not, you don't have that sense of accomplishment when you make.
That's so true. And then you don't really grow like to your full potential. I feel like coming a little bit under like a really lofty goal is better than not pushing yourself hard enough. And then you're just like, your level of growth doesn't really, you're not going as far. Right,
that's but you have to overcome that fear of failure, which is really ingrained in a lot of us. I mean, it took me 20 years to be willing to put those numbers down on paper and face the possibility that I might not make it.
Yeah, and I never really thought of it that way, that it's like really a fear of failure. But I guess, it is kind of. I feel like the reason why people don't do it is because they sometimes they get lazy or they aren't planning, but it really makes sense that a lot of it is probably like a lot more deep-seated, where it comes into this feeling of like, if I say that I'm going to do that and I don't do it, then there's something wrong with me.
Yeah. and I don't think we have a lot of lazy people running jewelry companies. No. It's just too hard a way to make a living. Yeah. So that's why I go to these deeper things. And I guess my message is just that, yes, you might be saving yourself from the possibility of failing at reaching your goal, but you're cheating yourself out of a really exciting, powerful tool and keeping all this craziness in your head where you could liberate yourself by getting it all down on paper. The trade-off is really worth it. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, I love it.
It's worth a try. Just try it once.
We spent a whole day planning out 2017 right after the live event. And we'd never done it that way. Like, we'd always set goals or whatever, but we'd never really sat down and with the entire team together and mapped the entire year out. And it felt so good. We're like, oh my gosh, that's exactly how we're going to get there to like our big goal. And it was really fun to see it all mapped out, because you start to break it down. Okay, so here's what we need to do here, and here's what we need to do here. Here are our top 3 priorities for this quarter, and here's how we're going to actually achieve it. So I loved it. We've always had like some sort of business plan, but like breaking it down even more, like it was like the best feeling ever. And I'm really excited to be working on these things in quarters.
So Tracy, I would like to congratulate you on bringing your whole team into that process, because I think when you have your leadership team involved in the planning process, it really creates a lot of alignment and buy-in within the organization, and it vastly increases the chances of accomplishing your goals.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I've been studying a lot about leadership, and also like, growing organizations like that are growing your organization more gracefully, I guess, because we all come up against struggles in small business, because you're working with a very small team. Sometimes you're working by yourself, and there's a lot of roadblocks that come in your way. And one of the things that I've noticed is that when I didn't include everyone, or it doesn't have to necessarily always be everyone, but the key players in the planning process, like you said, they weren't buying in. And so like not everyone was on the same page, which was a word that you used earlier, or a phrase that you used earlier. And it's hard to get where you want to go if people don't know where you're going, and you're not all in the same, I don't want to say the same boat, but like moving in that same direction.
Yeah, and we do the same thing every year. Our leadership team gets together to plan the year, and then we actually do a morning once a quarter also to just establish our priorities to the quarter, check in how we did last quarter, make any adjustments we need for the next quarter in order to reach our goals, that type of thing. But, it depends on the size of your organization. But what I want to say is, even if you're just yourself working as a jewelry designer, having at least a one-page business plan, it helps you create your own internal clarity, and then that winds up projecting outwards towards your customers and your branding and your overall messaging. It's amazing how that clarity will percolate out and help you create a stronger brand.
Okay, awesome. So with that being said, I want to ask you, what are some of the metrics that you want to include in your business plan?
I think before you do a business plan, it's really important to have hashed out your vision and mission statements, and people define those differently and title them differently. But basically, it comes down to what's your broader mission, and then what's your specific vision of how you're going to live that mission. And so a lot of then what you are going to include in your business plan flows from there. So of course you want business metrics like revenue, or maybe how many new wholesale customers you're going to get, or how many new doors you're going to get, or how many trade shows you're going to do. But I think it's also really important, if you have broader goals or missions included in your vision, that some of those elements are included in your plan as well, so that you make sure, if you have a social mission, that every quarter you're contributing to that social mission, and whatever that bigger picture is, that it's included, that you have some metrics in there that are financial, but also others that are maybe social mission, but also improving your processes and addressing strategic issues that are getting in the way of you reaching those financial goals. So it might be that, you need to increase your production. So one of your goals can be, training more people or finding new manufacturing facilities. Or maybe your computer systems are outmoded and it's taking you too long to invoice. And so you need to include in your plan, how you're going to address that.
Cool. I'm making so many notes here. Yeah. So I love what you said about things like setting your revenue goals, and then maybe like if you're doing wholesale and stuff like that, the number of doors or new accounts that you want, Or if you're selling online, maybe it's the number of repeat customers you want to have, or the number of newsletters you want to send out, or like you could also include like the planning for your marketing and stuff like that. And I love what you said about including your social mission, or if you have any philanthropy that you're wanting to target. So I know one of the designers in our community, who's also our Instagram guru over at Flourish and Thrive, Melissa Camilleri of Compliment Jewelry, she raises money to create scholarships to send underprivileged girls to school, which is really cool. So I think every year or every quarter or something like that, she has a scholarship that she gives away. Is there anything else that you think should be included, or anything else that you want to say about business planning, Nina?
Just, it's not a test. Like, it's not a question between not doing a plan and doing a perfect plan. Just go for it. Get something down on paper, and start to see, you can gradually mold your plan into the document that's going to be the most useful to you. It's your business plan. It should serve you. But you can't begin to discover how it can serve you and how you want to change it to serve you until you start. And so don't let fear of perfection or intimidation. I just don't be intimidated by the fear of not being able to write the perfect plan and then not write a plan. Just roll up your sleeves and, try the one-page business plan, or just download something. Just start by asking yourself questions, or if you have a partner, even if you just have one partner, it's amazing. There's an exercise that I did the first time we did a plan that included my leadership team, where I just said to everyone, write down on a piece of paper what you think our revenue should be at the end of this year, at the end of 3 years, and at the end of 10 years. And the range that we got was so unbelievable. I mean, just that exercise was so revealing. And even between two partners, you might be amazed at how different that would be. And so that's an example to me of how just the process of diving into the planning can be so, so useful.
That's awesome. I think like what I got out of that was like really just start where you are, and then I don't know, I feel like business plans should be almost like something that's moldable. So you have it, it's almost like a living document that could be changed almost over the years. And once you start, like your first one, like my 30-page one, 35-page one that I never looked at again, was a start. But now, I've like evolved the way that I plan for in both of my businesses. And over the years, as I've changed and I've like matured and learned how to plan better, the business plan sort of evolves with that. And then you get your team involved.
Yeah, I mean, I was really happy with the one-page business plan for 3 or 4 years until I really felt comfortable with the whole planning process. And then I realized that I needed something a little more that would draw my whole team in and give us some more tools like the quarterly rocks. And that's when I made the transition to the traction plan, and their business plans are called VTOs, Vision Traction Organizers, and they're a little bit different, but it's built on the same building blocks. So it wasn't super intimidating to transition because I already had my mission statement. I already had my vision statement. I already had my core values. I wasn't starting from nowhere.
Exactly.
And so, it's completely appropriate to change the format of the business plan as the needs of your business change.
I love that. Nina, thank you so much for being here today. Where can everyone find you?
At www.ninadesigns.com. It's designs with an S. And
Awesome.
We'd love to see everyone there. If you do visit our website, check out our blog. We have a lot of business resources on there. We really try and be a community as much as a marketplace. So there's a lot of tools for design inspiration and business advice and all kinds of fun stuff.
And you are so crystal clear about teaching business too. That's why I love to have you on the show.
Well, thank you. It's been great.
Thanks for being here, Nina.
Thank you for inviting me. I hope you guys all roll up your sleeves and try it. Just take a stab at that business plan.